welcome back to the Blissful Badger and my March Madness Army Showcase Showdown. Throughout this month, we're going to look at all of my armies, and I'd like you to rate these armies on 5 criteria on a scale of 1 to 10. And then at the end of the month, we're going to tally up all of the scores and see which army is the best out of my collection. So what are these criteria? 1. The paint scheme. Is my army cohesive? What level have I painted it to? Do these colors work for this army? 2. Playability. How did I go selecting models for this army? Is this a viable army on the battlefield? 3. My reason for owning it. Do I have a good justification for owning this army? 4. Theming. How much does this army fit their lore? Have I built this army to a standard that makes sense for what the army does in the lore? And 5, conversions and customization. What conversions did I make to this army? How did I make it my own? So which army are we checking out today? Today we're taking a look at my Chaos Space Marine and Death Guard armies. This is over a decade of collecting the Chaos Space Marines without ever intending to. And Nurgle since 8th edition. Alright. So, of the over a decade of collecting, I think it's been about 13 years total, I have collected quite a few launch boxes and versus boxes and random collections here and there, and my Chaos Space Marine and Death Guard armies are mostly from that. Now, that doesn't mean that I don't like these armies. Far from it. I have purchased a few things here and there intending for going into these armies. It's not just random stuff that I've collected. But would I have chosen these armies if I hadn't had those launch boxes? We'll never know. But we're going to start with the Chaos Space Marines. And if you notice, a lot of my core units in this are from Dark Vengeance. I have 2 copies of it for both 6th and 7th edition, and quite a few cultists in addition to that. And even more that I never even got around to building and painting. I also have the Chosen from that time period. I used these as a test bed for painting different color speed paints over metals. I wanted to see what they would look like, and some of them look better than others. The red is very nice, and the green looks interesting, but isn't quite as nice. And I believe I used a red wash and an orange wash and the black wash on these other ones. I think that one's actually a dark blue. I think that's the High Lord blue that I use. So there are interesting effects, and overall, I figured that Chaos Chosen were a good option for testing that kind of thing out on. Lots of trim and decent color options because, chaos. So, I also have quite a few of the firstborn legionnaires and corn berserkers. These are all the plastic ones from way back in the day. And I do have some new plastic legionnaires, but I haven't built them yet. But honestly, I like my Chaos Space Marines to be old and metal. This was a gift about a year or two ago, and I do need to get around to working on them because I really love how they look, and I want to give them the attention that they deserve. But one of the big things about this is they are on 25mm bases. And with my Chaos Space Marine army, I'm sorely tempted to make it where it's playable in older editions rather than new. I haven't really looked into how much effort it would actually take to do so, but I kind of feel that if I'm going to have to rebase a bunch of this stuff, I should see about what edition I actually want it to be viable in before I actually do that work. I think the newest kit I have is either the Mauler Fiend or the Obliterators. So I'm not that worried about where, a brand new model not having rules in whichever one I choose to build it for. And I might choose 10th edition. I don't know. We'll see how many of these things are actually still viable. I know that my Possessed are much older than the new kit. But, with all of these legionaries being firstborn, I'm going to have to do basing changes and everything like that. I haven't based any of these yet, though. So it's possible that I could just do it and call it a day. But I would like to get this army up and running. I don't feel any strong urges to add anything else to this army. But I have them. I might as well get them all up and running. Oh, also, back in the day, you could have multiple different kill teams, and you could have cultists and legionaries. So I did that. That was actually one of my earlier kill teams. I painted those 5 legionaries in 3 hours, I believe, and the same with those 10 cultists. So there's no real color consistency against, for this army. I went with some pretty vibrant oranges earlier on with my cultists, and there's no real cohesiveness because what is based is not actually anything that I really care for right now. I do love that some of these are still green basing. I mean, shows you how long that's been painted. But overall, this is definitely an army that is very chaotic in nature. And I don't know. I like the fact that I have it. I would like to get it all painted. But I need to figure out if I want to do Black Legion or I don't know. I could do Red Corsairs or a variety of different colors. I could go just all sorts of mishmash. I feel like the actual Space Marines, the Legionnaires, need to be a specific color, whereas all of the cultists can be whatever they want. I don't think that's a problem, but I do need to find a nice basing scheme for them and actually sit out and do some of this stuff. And then on to my Death Guard. Again, I had a 8th edition Dark Imperium box that helped me grow my collection from the start. And I've picked up some Poxwalkers here and there over the years, some of which I used to check out my blue color scheme for my Cruel Boys. Again, interesting stream I had about a year and a half ago. And I do have some more Poxwalkers painted up, and I have a character that will eventually get done. He's my consistently not done character model. Whereas everything else, once I start it, I want to finish it. That character is not that case. But I eventually chose this army when I had the opportunity to purchase a Chaos Knight and Mortarion with a whole bunch of other things for a very good price. And that's actually why this army even exists. If I hadn't found that sale, I probably would have sold off the couple of things that I had beforehand. But instead, I have, I think, 2,300 points in this army, and almost a third of it is characters. My Death Guard army has so many characters. Oh, and a piece of terrain. But I don't have very many of the vehicles. I don't have anything else crazy. It's just mostly characters and Poxwalkers. And, I mean, I suppose if I needed to, I could borrow a rhino or two. That might actually make the army more playable. But I've never actually fielded this army. I do have a few different levels of paint on my Poxwalkers. I think I have more Poxwalkers painted for this army than the rest of the army combined, which doesn't really get me very far in the point values. But I don't know, I think this is a doable army without too much effort. The previous owner had primed those green. I wouldn't have done that, but I can work with it. I actually primed the ones in the white and the black. So that gives a slightly better look at what I have had and what I didn't have in my collection. And I definitely want to get this army to a playable state. I think I'd have a lot of fun playing it, but I'm not really sure at this point what I should work on. Well, yeah, I should work on Mortarion. That's a cool model to work on. But it makes sense to get the majority of the other basic troops done first. That might be one of the reasons why I haven't worked on this army. Just knowing I have that centerpiece model at some point to paint is a great feeling, but also a little bit overwhelming. I'm sure I could do a good job on it, But at the same time, both of these armies have kind of been back burner armies. They're not any of my top priorities, and I'm not actively looking to add anything to them. But I'm also not actively looking at finishing them. So I think both of these need more of a I don't know, a more specific goal in mind. Like, if I set up, let's get 1,000 points painted, and I have a 1,000 point list, perhaps I could actually get that done by the end of the year. To decide on a color scheme and basing scheme for 1,000 points of Chaos Space Marines might actually work as well. Like, it shouldn't be that hard to paint up a Mauler Fiend and a couple of Obliterators and base some models. Again, I have more cultists painted than Space Marines, but, it shouldn't be that hard. I just don't have that goal designed yet. So, I don't know. It's kind of weird. I know that the way that Chaos plays and Death Guard plays are ever evolving, but I should probably figure out a list and work on it before it becomes similar to my Grey Knights, where the playstyle is just completely different than what I originally intended. So again, Launchbox halves are very interesting in what happens when you keep them. Like, you can tell I definitely have more than just the launch boxes on both of these forces, especially my 15 metal Terminators. But beyond that, I have launch boxes that were not the interest. So, I feel like the Death Guard army, since it doesn't have any of the big tanks, it's kind of lacking in what it should be able to do on the tabletop right now, which I don't know. I don't feel like basing everything on tabletop playability is the right thing. I would actually love to have a Helldrake, even though it's going to sit just like all of these others that have a whole bunch of trim. But one day, that wouldn't be a horrible thing to add. But will I ever get it painted up is the real question. So I think definitely for these two armies, the priority is get a better scheme, get a better list, intent written down, and maybe actually just work on some of the things that I already have. But this is my army, my Chaos Space Marine army, and my Death Guard army as of this month. If you would like to see a full breakdown of my army list, there is a link to a spreadsheet in the description below. Subscribe if you haven't so that you don't miss any future videos. I also want to thank my patrons and supporters for making these videos possible. And until next time, I hope you find your bit of bliss.